Hello everyone, welcome back to Earth Turtle. Today we're continuing our tour through the Phanerozoic Eon by looking at its fifth period, the Carboniferous Period. Before we begin, let's talk about last episode. Last episode we finished talking about the Devonian period. During the Devonian, jawed fishes greatly diversified. Amphibians make their first appearance. The Devonian ended with the second mass extinction event, which resulted in many species going extinct. The Carboniferous period was from 359 to 299 million years ago. It is the fifth period of the Paleozoic era of the Phanerozoic Eon. The name Carboniferous means carbon bearing, since most of the coal that we use today comes from this period. In North America, this period is divided into the Mississippian and the Pennsylvanian. In the early Carboniferous, the continent Euamerica moved closer to Gondwana. A large ice cap formed in Gondwana at the South Pole. Later in the period, Euamerica collided with Gondwana, forming the continent Pangaea. The Panthelastic Ocean was to the west, while the Paleotethys Ocean was to the east. Forests heavily expanded, causing high land animal diversity. In the early Carboniferous, global temperatures increased from the previous Devonian period. Areas close to the equator were away from glaciation and had warmer and more humid conditions where bountiful plant life thrived. Carbon dioxide levels dropped down significantly. Most of our coal reserves originate from the Carboniferous, further providing evidence for bountiful plant life. The large landmass of Pangaea majorly affected air and ocean circulation patterns. Major glaciation started around 330 million years ago and lasted until the following Permian period. Let's take a look at plants during the Carboniferous. Lepidodendron was a large tree-like club moss that grew during this time. As a reminder, club moss is a group of primitive plants that produce spores that still have some species alive today. Lepidodendron grew up to 130 feet tall. It produced cones that contained spores. It had relatively little wood and were supported by bark-like tissue. Also thriving during this time were ferns. Ferns are primitive plants that also produce spores. Again, there are also some species alive today. There were many alive during this time that ranged from a few inches to 30 plus feet tall. Another plant group during this time were the medulosans. These were primitive plants that used seeds. They grew as bushes or small trees. The species Medulosa grew up to 10 to 17 feet tall, with seeds the size of eggs. Conifers make their first appearance. Conifers are trees with needle or scale-like leaves. Conifers produce cones which contain seeds. Conifers are still widespread today. The lush plant-filled landscapes were also filled by terrestrial invertebrates. Oxygen at this time was 28% compared to today's 21%. Thanks to the abundance of oxygen, some arthropods grew very large. Arthropleura was a millipede that grew up to 7 feet long. It was heavily armored and had a segmented exoskeleton. Meganeura was a dragonfly with a 3-foot wingspan. In the Carboniferous, there was also a large diversification of terrestrial vertebrates. Among these were many primitive amphibians, including the Temnospondyl group. The Temnospondyls was a group of tetrapods that contained members that would lead to modern amphibians. We also have the appearance of the first amniotes. Amniotes are a group of organisms that had a major evolutionary breakthrough. Before amniotes, terrestrial animals were restricted to water due to their soft-shelled eggs. Amniotes evolved into laying hard-shelled eggs. This means they were no longer restricted to water. These first amniotes split into two groups. Sauropsids was the lineage that led to reptiles and birds. The synapsids were the lineage that led to the mammals. By the end of the Carboniferous, primitive reptiles appeared, and they had lizard-like appearances. Synapsids grew large in the late Carboniferous and into the following Permian period. Ophiocodon grew to nearly 10 feet long and had a crocodile-like appearance. Again, it was a synapsid, so it was within the lineage that would later include mammals. And with that, we finished talking about the Carboniferous period. Join me in the next episode where we'll talk about the Paleozoic era's last period, the Permian period. Thanks.